Well, good morning, Phantom Shipmates. It is the 15th of March, and I'm getting underway for my major adventure of the year. Except I'm not. I was supposed to make a very unconventional transatlantic passage with the destination of Labrador, Newfoundland, and there's some French islands just off the coast of Newfoundland. Unfortunately, with the evolution of the virus, I just don't want to be away from my family for that long. So, for the next 4 to 6 weeks, I'm just going to be doing local sailing and see how this all plays out. I don't usually show maintenance videos. There's enough of those on the YouTube already. So I won't show maintenance videos, but I will show kind of the executive summary or the end product of things that I did in preparation for my transatlantic passage. Well, here's a shot you haven't seen before. Isabel is topless. I have had the mast removed in order to change all of the standing rigging, which is about 12 years old, or even slightly more. This is what it looks like. This is just a lump of metal here. You can see where the mast sits right here. Some boats have a mast that goes all the way through and sits on the keel. And I don't know if there's an advantage or disadvantage to this method where it's stepped on the coach roof, or if it goes all the way through the keel. So if any of you do know which is better or what the advantages or disadvantages are, please leave a comment on that. I polished up the chain plates, just knocked off some of the grime that was on them, but they look just fine. So I didn't see any reason to change them. And the same thing, this is clever how they hook it up. They attach with the halyard, they run the strap, and the actual lifting is done from the base of the mast, but they just stabilize it at the top of the mast. That's quite clever. This is the local crew from Secteur Blanc, La Rochelle Grémont, which is the local Selden agent. So when you take your mast off, you don't have to take the halyards and the general lines. You don't have to take that off. You can leave all that on. Obviously, this is where all the wires come out from the bottom of the mast for the VHF and the lighting. Always a moment of stress. These guys are pros. They've done this hundreds of times, but for me, this is the second time. Now you're setting it down on the on that lead block. Just sits down right on top of that. They'll secure the stays. To adjust, it's kind of the same gauge as a luge, but a lot more sophisticated, so they can read exactly the tension that's on the stays. Okay, it's confession time. I have not been diligent in cleaning my boat's hull in prior years. When I would pull it out, I would just give it a pressure washing pretty quick, maybe some very light sanding, and then throw on a couple of coats of anti-fouling. And if you do that year after year, I hope this shows up on the camera, you end up with this orange peel texture on the... And what I'm really happy with is the propeller. Look at the propeller. It looks great. You know, this is Velux Plus with the primer. I put the primer on first and Velux Plus, but in the past I didn't put anything on there, and it looked terrible. There was barnacles and those worm things growing all over it, and it was just terrible. And this year I put on the primer and Velux Plus, and it was wonderful. And I wanted to compare that with, this is Trilux 33 over here on the sail drive, and that's just beautiful as well. Look at that. There was no growth on there, and all of the anti-fouling stayed on it. So good story there. Velux Plus and Trilux 33. I wouldn't know how to differentiate them, but they're looking pretty good. And for all my lack of attention, the keel actually looks pretty good. You know, I mean, that's not bad for a keel that's 12 years old. Yeah, there's a couple of rust spots, but you know, boats don't sink because of rust spot on the keel. You know, so I don't worry about that. Again, it'll all be sun blasted. Then I'll put a coating of rust remover on it, and then some epoxy primer, and then the anti-fouling again. And there we go. After the sandblasting, that took about 4 hours for the professional to do, putting up the protection around it and everything like that. And it is just smooth as a baby's butt now. So what I'm going to do is a quick sanding of the whole thing again, very light sanding, then clean it all off with acetone, put on several coats of epoxy primer, and then the anti-fouling goes back on again. So still quite a bit of work to do, but all of this for 0.3 knots more. And this is what it looks like after 3 coats of Interprotect epoxy primer. Just really smooth, and now this keeps it super waterproof for the future. I did it on the keel as well. 2, 3, 4 coats. 4 coats I'll put on the keel and on the rudder. But looks very good. And so the next step is put on the anti-fouling. Okay, all of the fun and games of the annual haul out are finished now. I put on 2 coats of Micron 350 anti-fouling over 3 or 4 coats of the epoxy primer, and you can see the hull is very smooth now compared to what it looked like before. The prop and sail drive is all done. Everything looks good. Isabel sent me a note last night thanking me for getting rid of her cellulite. Eric, our Viking friend, made a confession of something that he did that wasn't very smart these last couple of years, and that he's been sailing with an expired life raft. So I'm going to make a confession too. I have been sailing for the last 3 seasons with an unsafe condition. This line here, this little piece of line that feeds into the slot of the furler on the Genoa, that's called a bolt rope. And the one that I had before was 6 millimeters in diameter, and it wasn't the right size for this furler. And I could not lower the Genoa except in the most calm conditions, and I mean dead calm. And even then it took me 15 minutes with all my strength and all my weight to pull it down. So if that had broken, if the furling line had broken in a force 8 storm and the Genoa had unfurled, I would not have been able to lower it. That was not very smart of me. So I've had it changed. You can see they changed the tape right here. They changed the tape and the bolt rope, or the left rope that slides up there, and now it's 5 millimeters in diameter there, all the way up the length of the furler. And now if I release the halyard, it'll just fall straight down. You know, so that's great. That's what I should have had all along. I'm a bit embarrassed that I didn't make that change earlier. It cost all of 230 euros for the labor to have that done. Another safety related change that I made this year was I changed my lifelines. In the past, there was a cable that ran along here, a cable like this, that ran along the whole length all the way back to almost to the winch back there. but it ran inside of the shroud lines. And the problem with running inside the shroud lines was that if I wanted to come forward, I had to unclip at the shrouds and then reclip on the other side of the shrouds. And in really bad weather conditions, I would do that. But on a day like today, I wouldn't do it. You know, I just, oh, it's not worth it. So I wouldn't clip in at all. And that's just not a good idea. This is so easy to clip in now. So I just do it whenever I need to. Now, you know, ideally they say you want to run the line as close as you can to the center of the boat. But that's just not practical on my boat because I've got sheets and all kinds of things in the way there. So I couldn't do that. So I'm much happier, and I will be strapping in whenever I come forward. Very easily done now. Another addition to the boat for this transatlantic passage this year was I bought two very inexpensive 100-watt solar panels off of Amazon. I think they were, you know, it was something like 100 euros a piece. And because I have a fuel cell, a methanol fuel cell, I didn't really need it. So this was just for insurance. And my fuel cell is a little bit under capacity anyway. So this does help out a little bit. Because one of them is going to be in the shadow almost all of the time, I've hooked them up in parallel. And I did get rid of the inexpensive Chinese pulse wavelength modulation, the controller, the PWM, and I replaced that with a Victron MPPT controller. And I'll show you how much electricity this generates in a minute. I've got it Bluetooth to my phone and to my iPad, so I can show you that in a minute. So 200 watts of theoretical extra energy here. And up there, you're looking at another big change for this year. That is a new mainsail that comes from Elvstrom. It's a tri-radial, I think it's called a DCX or something like that, 41 square meters. It's almost bulletproof material. My other sail was 12 years old and it was growing thin in places. I had abused it horribly. So it's time to get a new mainsail. This one, I was so happy with the old one I had that I tried to get exactly the same thing. Obviously they've improved, they've changed some things on how they run the reefing lines and all that, but that cost 4,800 euros for the new mainsail. And just in case you're wondering, one of the other things I did this year, because it was just expiring, was get my life raft updated. So now it's good until February 2023. So it's good for another 3 years. And that cost, mine is a 4-seat life raft, a little less expensive than some of the others. It was something like 430 euros to have the checkup done on it. Another thing I did for my transatlantic passage this year was I have rigged the 3 reef lines so that I can do them now. Usually I don't have the 3rd reef rigged before going across sea, but I didn't want to do it at sea in a gale. I have to put the 3rd reef in and going forward and all that. So now I can do it all from the cockpit. So thanks very much to my friend James from Samingo Sails for inspiring me to finally get off my rear end and rig that 3rd reef line permanently. Thanks, James. One of the other changes I had considered making this year was to get a wind vane, a hydro vane specifically. They made me a very reasonable offer at the La Rochelle boat show, but this is the problem. I have a swim platform that I've lowered now, so to mount the hydro vane or whatever brand wind vanes centrally, I need to reinforce that and lock it into place so that the swim platform no longer works. And I just wasn't really comfortable with that. Now with the hydro vane, they say you can mount it off center. So I made the calculations. I would have to move it 1.5 meters off center. And then I made the trig calculation of at 15 degrees angle of heel and 20 degrees angle of heel, how far out of the water would the rudder of the hydro vane be? And it just didn't make any sense. Especially I remember at 20 degrees angle of heel, which is not that uncommon. It's not comfortable, but it's not that uncommon either. So to make a long story short, no wind vane this year. And here's another investment I made this year in preparation for my transatlantic passage. I bought an Iridium GO from Predict Wind so that I could download Gribs as I go around across the Atlantic Ocean. And I have just done that. I've just downloaded a Grib. I don't know if it'll show up on in this lighting here, but just downloaded a Grib going across the Bay of Biscay. As though I were going out to the point of Spain, and it took about probably about 5 minutes to download that Grib, 3 or 4 day Grib, and I got the weather routing. I don't really need the weather routing feature, but anyway, I'm delighted with that additional capability of understanding of the weather as I go across the Atlantic Ocean. So Iridium GO, a big thumbs up for that. Back to black.